My dad didn't show up for my birthday this year. That was the first time in 29 years it had happened. Not once, not even during my broke college days or when he was working graveyard shifts to keep our house from foreclosure, had he ever missed it. But this year there was no call. No text. No, happy birthday, kiddo. Just silence. I tried to brush it off. People get busy. Maybe he thought I was out with friends. Maybe he meant to call but forgot what day it was. That would have made sense, except it wasn't just the call. It was the gift I'd mailed him 3 weeks earlier. A limited edition print of a 1978 Mustang, his dream car when he was young. I'd spent hours tracking it down. I knew it had arrived. USPS marked it delivered, signed by Kay Whitaker. His wife, Karen. So when he finally called me, 2 weeks later, it wasn't to apologize. It wasn't even to check in. It was to ask why I'd been distant. That's when I knew something was wrong. I said, "I didn't hear from you on my birthday." There was a pause. "Karen told me you were going out of town," he said. "She said you didn't want any calls because you needed a break." I nearly dropped my phone. Why would she say that? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Another pause. "I don't know. I guess I assumed she heard it from you." She hadn't. Because I never said that. What I had done was text both of them the night before my birthday, asking if they were free for a Zoom call like last year. No one responded. "I sent you a gift," I added. "Did you get it?" "No," he said, his voice now confused. "What gift?" That's when it clicked. The Mustang print. Gone. The text? Unanswered. The Zoom call? Ignored. It wasn't an accident. It was a pattern. And it wasn't the first time. My name is Laurel Kingsley. I'm 32 and I live in Asheville, North Carolina, where I work as a freelance documentary editor. I live alone in a small craftsman-style bungalow I bought myself 2 years ago after a decade of saving. I love quiet mornings, long hikes, and books that break your heart a little. My father, Daniel, was my best friend growing up. After my mom died when I was 24, we leaned on each other more than ever. We had Sunday lunches every week, went to antique car shows together, and spent Christmas evenings playing old jazz records in the living room. And then Karen arrived. She was charming, polished, and always just a little too smooth. I remember the first time she came to dinner. She brought a pie that tasted like it came from a boutique bakery and complimented the baseboards. My dad was smitten. I tried to be happy for him. God knows he deserved joy. But over time things shifted. At first it was small. She suggested they travel for Thanksgiving instead of hosting our usual family dinner. Then she redecorated the living room and stored all of Mom's old pictures in a safe place. When I asked if I could take the framed one of my mom and me at the beach, Karen smiled and said it had been misplaced during the remodel. He always had a reason. Always smiling. Always innocent. But this, stealing my gift, lying about my messages, this wasn't small. And worse, my dad didn't even realize what was happening. "I think there's been some kind of mix-up," he said. "I'll talk to Karen." But I already knew how that would go. She'd look him in the eye with that perfect lipstick and say something sweet and logical and completely false. And he'd believe her, not because he was naive, but because he wanted to believe she had no reason to lie. But she did. Because I was in her way. I ended the call early, telling him I had a work deadline. Then I sat in my kitchen for nearly an hour, staring at nothing. My tea had gone cold. My hands were shaking. For the first time since she entered our lives, I realized something that made my stomach twist. Karen didn't want to share my dad. And if I wasn't careful, she was going to erase me completely. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me, replaying the conversation over and over in my mind. My dad had no idea I'd sent a gift. No idea I'd reached out. No idea that the woman he married had intercepted all of it. I kept hearing his voice. "I guess I assumed she heard it from you." He sounded so calm. So trusting. I felt sick. The next morning, after pacing around my kitchen for half an hour with a cup of untouched coffee, I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened up the old email thread between me, my dad, and Karen. We'd used it during the early pandemic days to schedule FaceTimes and share photos. It had fallen quiet lately, but I knew I'd used it to send the tracking info for the Mustang print. Sure enough, there it was. My email from 2 weeks ago. Subject line, "Happy birthday, Dad." Inside, a short note, a photo of the gift and the USPS tracking link. I checked the read receipt. From Karen's IP. I stared at the screen, pulse rising. He had seen it. And said nothing. Next, I opened my phone and scrolled to the group text we'd used for years. Most of the messages lately were from me. Short updates, invitations, just checking in texts. Most had no response. Some had only a thumbs up from Karen. But one stood out. A message I'd sent on April 7th, asking if they wanted to visit the Blue Ridge Flower Festival together like we had 2 years before. My dad had loved that trip. He'd taken a dozen pictures and called it the perfect weekend. No response. I remembered him mentioning offhand that Karen wasn't feeling well that weekend. So they'd stayed home. But I had posted photos on Instagram that same day. Pictures of the festival, of the crowd, of the lunch I ate by myself under a white pop-up tent. Karen had liked the photo. I sat back in my chair, breath catching. My mind was racing now, connecting dots I hadn't even realized were there. The missed messages. The excuses. The changed plans. All of it pointed to one simple, horrifying truth. He was screening me out. Like junk mail. But it wasn't enough to feel it. I needed to be sure. And more than that, I needed proof. So I dug. First, I logged into the USPS site with the tracking number I'd used. The Mustang print had been delivered, all right, signed for by Kay Whitaker at 9:48 a.m., 2 full days before my dad said anything about not receiving a gift. Then I went deeper. Karen worked from home. She was a freelance interior decorator with a flashy Instagram presence full of expensive throw pillows and words like statement pieces. I'd always admired her business, even if I didn't fully trust her. She loved to share. Which, it turned out, was her biggest mistake. Because buried deep in her Instagram stories from 2 weeks ago was a video clip. It was only 10 seconds long. A soft pan over their living room. She'd captioned it, "Finally convinced Dan to hang this ugly thing face with tears of joy," with a laughing emoji. And there it was. On the far wall. Framed. Hung. My Mustang print. My blood ran cold. She hadn't just stolen my gift. She'd lied about it, then put it on display. I zoomed in on the photo, jaw clenched. There was no doubt. My note had been removed. My signature, my handwriting, erased. But the print was mine. My idea. My money. My effort. And my father had no clue. I sat back, stunned, watching the story play again. She had bragged about it. Publicly. Like it was hers to claim. That was the moment something shifted in me. I'd spent years trying to keep the peace. Telling myself that Karen wasn't malicious. Just forgetful. Polished. Maybe a little territorial. But this wasn't forgetful. This was calculated. She wanted me gone. Quietly. Completely. And if I didn't do something, she'd get her wish. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't even going to tell her I knew. I was going to do what I do best. I was going to document everything. I didn't call her. I didn't call my dad either. Instead, I went quiet. It was the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Not the loud, raging kind, but the low-pressure kind. The kind you don't notice until you realize your ears have popped and the air feels wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, I did exactly what Karen would have wanted. I disappeared. No calls. No texts. I didn't like a single post on my dad's Facebook. I didn't comment on Karen's endless reels of rustic luxury kitchen renos or her try-hard stories about clients who never listen. I let her believe she'd won. And while she enjoyed her little victory lap, I began the real work. I started backing up every message. Screenshotted the USPS delivery confirmation. Archived the Instagram story showing my Mustang print. Pulled the group text logs, carefully noting all the one-sided messages I'd sent. I even downloaded a screen recording of a voicemail I'd left my dad weeks earlier. One he never mentioned, likely because he never heard it. Karen was deleting more than just my place in the family, she was rewriting the story itself. But I had the receipts. Literally. And then came the break I wasn't expecting. It was a Wednesday morning when I got the email. Subject line: Interior Style Collab Opportunity. It was one of those mass pitches that go out to influencers and creators. I only noticed it because it landed in my junk folder and I happened to be doing a monthly clean out. The sender? A small design collective based in Charleston. And the recipient list was exposed. Classic rookie mistake. There she was. Karen at KarenWhitakerStyle.com. A professional email address. And suddenly I had an idea. It started innocently enough. I visited her website. Beautiful, of course. All moody taupes and washed-out wood tones, like a restoration hardware showroom had been filtered through a latte. But then I checked the metadata. Buried in the source code of one of her recent portfolio posts, a bathroom remodel, was a client review that caught my eye. It was from Sarah Kingsley, my mother's name. The review was fake. And worse, the bathroom photo wasn't even hers. It was lifted straight from a Better Homes and Gardens blog. I'd edited footage for last year. My heart thudded. Not only was Karen intercepting personal messages and gifts, she was faking testimonials from dead women. My dead mother. On a public-facing business platform. I felt a flush of cold run through my body. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was a woman who lied as easily as she breathed. And that's when I decided. This wasn't going to end with a quiet confrontation in a kitchen. It needed to be bigger, bolder, public. So I made a list. 1. Collect digital evidence. Already in progress. 2. Test the voicemail theory. I sent a new message to my dad, casually asking him to confirm our coffee plans that Friday. A plan we hadn't actually made. I wanted to see if he'd bring it up. If not, I'd know for sure Karen was deleting them. 3. Planned a new gift. Something trackable. Something I could prove had been received. Something small enough to slip past her or not. 4. Start filming. Not publicly. Not yet. Just small things. Screen captures. Time-stamped logs. Voice memos after every interaction. 5. Find a witness. Someone outside the family. Someone she couldn't manipulate. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe someone from church. Maybe one of her design clients. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about clarity. I wasn't trying to punish her. I was trying to show my dad the truth. Because I realized something important that night as I scrolled through Karen's curated world of fake reviews and borrowed backsplash photos. You can't fight shadows with arguments. You fight them with light. And I was done hiding in the dark. It started with a brunch invite. Casual. Innocent. Carefully engineered. Dad, I texted. Thinking of grabbing brunch at Crooked Spoon this Saturday. Their smoked salmon Benedict is calling my name. Want to join? I sent it directly to him. Not the group thread. No CC to Karen. Just a simple message. One-on-one. Then I waited. And waited. Nothing. No reply that day. Or the next. I didn't follow up. I just noted the time I sent it, the timestamp in my phone's message log, and moved on. 3 days later I got a call from Karen. Not my dad. Karen. Laurel, she said brightly as if we were old friends. Hey sweetheart. Just wanted to let you know Dan's feeling a little under the weather this weekend, so we're laying low. Maybe another time. I smiled tightly. Oh no, I said. I didn't realize he was sick. I texted him directly. There was a pause. Well, she said smoothly, I check his phone sometimes. He forgets to clear notifications and it stresses him out. I bet you do. I thanked her and hung up, then immediately backed up the call log. My father never even knew I'd asked him to brunch. And just like that, item number 2 on my list. Tested and confirmed. The next step was the gift. This time I kept it small. A leather-bound notebook engraved with the words, "For the memories that matter." I slipped a photo inside the front pocket. Me and my dad at Cades Cove, taken the summer after Mom died. We'd driven through the Smoky Mountains, stopped at every overlook, listened to old blues CDs the whole way. It was his favorite memory. Mine too. The notebook cost $14 and came with tracked delivery. When the package arrived, I knew because the USPS notification hit my inbox at 10:12 a.m. Delivered. Left with individual. Signature received, K. Whitaker. That afternoon I posted an Instagram story. Just me sipping tea holding up a second copy of the same notebook. No caption. Just the cover. For the memories that matter. Karen saw it within 15 minutes. Viewed the story. No response. 3 days later my dad called. Laurel, he said, thanks for the card you mailed last month. Karen just found it in a junk drawer. No idea how it got there. He chuckled like it was nothing. A funny accident. A misplaced envelope. I played along. No worries. Glad it found its way. But my stomach clenched. There had been no card. There had been no drawer. And now she was inventing lost letters to cover her tracks. Still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed someone else to see it. That's when the idea hit me, church. My dad had been going to the same small Methodist church since I was a kid. I hadn't been in years, but I knew a lot of the congregation still remembered me, and they definitely noticed Karen's sudden social ascension over the past few years. She was now on the Women's Planning Committee, coordinated the annual wreath fundraiser, and styled the Christmas tree in the narthex like it was a Pottery Barn showroom. He loved being adored. Loved being the young stepmom with the good blowout and a Pinterest-perfect casserole recipe. So I showed up. Unannounced. I slipped into a pew 3 rows behind them. My dad looked surprised and thrilled when he turned and saw me. Karen's face twitched. Just slightly. I leaned forward and smiled. Thought I'd join you today. Figured it's been too long. Dad reached over the pew and squeezed my hand. Karen didn't say a word. After the service, I made a point of staying close, introducing myself to the people Karen only vaguely referred to as the gals, chatting with her old design clients, and laughing with Mrs. Ainsley, the church secretary who used to sneak me peppermints when I was 5. "Oh honey, you should come to the spring banquet next month," she gushed. "We're doing a slideshow of family memories. Karen said she'd collect some photos from your dad." Slideshow. Family photos. The irony made my chest tighten. Karen had removed almost every photo of my mom from the house. The only ones left were in a shoebox I'd smuggled out during a closet purge she once hosted like it was HGV. "I'd love to help with the slideshow," I told Mrs. Ainsley, locking eyes with Karen, who was suddenly very quiet. "In fact, I have a few from when my mom was still alive. And from the trip to Cades Cove. You remember that one, right, Dad?" He blinked. "Of course I do. That was one of the best weekends we ever had." Karen smiled, strained. "Oh yes. I think I've seen a photo or two from that trip." "You have," I said gently. "It's framed in your living room." Her lips pressed into a thin, tight line. I left church that day with a warm hug from my dad and a barely concealed glare from Karen. It wasn't a smoking gun, not yet. But the fuse had been lit. And this time I wasn't backing down. The slideshow was the perfect setup. I spent the week combing through old USB drives, dusty photo envelopes, even a few of Mom's old journals I'd kept in a locked trunk. I scanned everything: birthdays, summer road trips, awkward promposals with my dad pretending not to cry. It was all there. I was careful. I didn't just include myself and my mom. I added photos of my dad's early years. His Navy service. The first car he ever restored. Pictures of him and Karen from the wedding. Smiling, polished, manicured. Right next to a photo of my parents on their honeymoon, both sunburned and laughing barefoot in the sand. The contrast wasn't cruel. It was honest. And I sent it all to Mrs. Ainsley at church, CE Karen and my dad. Karen replied the next morning. "Thanks, Laurel. I'll go through these and send my own additions shortly. Hope all is well." No emojis. No fake cheer. I touched a nerve. Saturday morning came fast. The church's spring banquet was simple. Potluck dishes, paper name tags, and a projector that constantly overheated. But the pews were full. Everyone smiling. The smell of casseroles hung thick in the air. I sat between my dad and Mrs. Ainsley near the front. Karen was on his other side, fussing with her scarf and pretending not to glance at me. When the lights dimmed and the projector clicked on, I braced myself. The slideshow began. Soft piano music. Fading transitions. The first photos were safe. Childhood shots of church families, school recitals, 4th of July BBQs. People in the room murmured with nostalgia. Then came mine. A photo of me and my dad building a snow fort in our backyard. Then one of him holding me on his shoulders at the state fair. Then my mom smiling behind a birthday cake lit with candles. The room cooed with warmth. My father leaned forward slightly, mouth parting in surprise. I could see him remembering. Then came the Cades Cove picture, the one I'd slipped into the notebook Karen stole. His hand moved unconsciously to his chest. Karen stiffened. She hadn't included a single photo. Not one. The rest of the show passed in a blur. When the lights came up and the clapping started, Karen turned toward Mrs. Ainsley. "I thought I sent a whole folder of photos last week," she said, her voice light but off-key. Mrs. Ainsley smiled kindly. "Oh, I never received anything from you, dear. Only Laurel's files. But they were perfect. Such a gift." Karen's mouth opened, then shut again. I turned to my dad, who was still staring at the now blank screen. I sent that notebook too, I said quietly just to him. The one with the Cades Cove picture inside. A few weeks ago. He blinked. Notebook. My gaze met his. I figured you didn't get it. He looked over at Karen. She smiled too quickly. Oh, you mean that little journal? I wasn't sure who it was from. It didn't have a note. It did. He turned back to me and I saw it, the flicker. Not anger. Not disbelief. But doubt. The first crack. That night after we said our goodbyes and I'd helped stack chairs in the parish hall, my dad walked me out to my car alone. The spring air was cool. The parking lot was nearly empty. Laurel, he said, pausing by my car door, why didn't you say something earlier? I hesitated. Because I didn't want it to sound like I was accusing her. Or asking you to pick sides. He looked down at the pavement. I've been wondering why things feel off lately. Between us. They feel off because someone's been editing the story, I said gently. Deleting messages. Hiding things. And I've spent a long time wondering if maybe I was crazy for noticing. He was quiet for a long time. Then, I'm not sure what's going on. But I'll look into it. I nodded. That was all I needed. Not a fight. Not an apology. Just that, a signal that the fog was lifting. I got in my car, turned the key and exhaled for the first time in weeks. He was slipping. And I was just getting started. Karen's retaliation didn't come as yelling. Came as baked goods. The day after the church banquet, my dad stopped by my house unexpectedly, something he hadn't done in over a year. He brought a Tupperware of lemon bars. Said Karen made them for me to say thank you for the slideshow. I stood there in my doorway, blinking at the cheerful powdered sugar, dusted trap in his hands. I took them. Of course I did. Smiled. Said thank you. Offered him tea. But the whole time I could feel it, the maneuvering. She knew the slideshow had landed. She knew my dad had questions. And now she was smoothing the air. Smothering it in citrus glaze. I made us tea and we sat on the porch. He asked about work. I asked about his garden. But the real conversation hung in the air between us like heavy humidity, not spoken but everywhere. At one point he said, you know, Karen mentioned she's been feeling a little left out lately. I sipped my tea. Left out of what? I asked. He shrugged. Family things, I guess. I let the silence stretch. Then I said very evenly, I've been left out of a lot more than feelings. He didn't argue. Just looked down at the lemon bar in his hand. Crumbs gathered in his lap. That night I got a text from Karen. Hope you liked the lemon bars. Thought we could start fresh. Let me know when you're free for lunch. Just us girls. Made my skin crawl. But I replied, sure. Let's set something up soon. Because now I needed her close. The following week I doubled down on my plan. I purchased a small hidden audio recorder. The kind designed for interviews. Legal in North Carolina as long as one party, me, knows it's happening. I wasn't out to ambush her. I just needed evidence. Not for social media. Not for YouTube. For my dad. For clarity. For truth. We met at a local cafe with hanging plants and mismatched mugs. Karen showed up in full performance mode. Oversized sunglasses, coral lipstick, a flowy boho dress that screamed curated innocence. I'm so glad we're doing this, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. It's silly how things have gotten strained. I smiled, setting my phone face down on the table, recorder already rolling from my pocket. It has, I agreed. And I'd really love to understand why. She hesitated. Tilted her head slightly like a golden retriever hearing a foreign word. I'm not sure I know what you mean. You've intercepted messages from me. You told Dad I never sent him a birthday gift. You've erased voicemails. Rewritten plans. Her eyes widened just for a fraction of a second, then narrowed. Laurel, if you're going to start throwing around accusations. I'm not accusing, I said calmly. I'm stating. And I have the receipts. I pulled out my phone and gently placed it between us. Photos. Tracking numbers. Screenshots. All time-stamped. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to tell you that whatever this game is, it's over. Her jaw tightened. The cafe around us buzzed with soft jazz and distant conversation. He looked around, then leaned in. You think you know everything, she said, her voice low. But you don't know him like I do. He doesn't want conflict. He doesn't want guilt. I'm protecting him from stress. From chaos. I stared at her. You're not protecting him, I said. You're isolating him. She leaned back, folded her arms. And what exactly do you plan to do about it? I smiled. Not cruelly. Not smugly. Just enough. You'll see. I left 10 minutes later, polite as ever, finishing my coffee and complimenting her shoes on the way out. Then I drove straight home, uploaded the audio and saved 3 backup copies. One on my laptop, one on a hard drive, and one on a private cloud folder I labeled Truth, for Dad only. For 3 days I heard nothing. No texts. No emails. Not even a passive-aggressive like on one of my Instagram stories. Karen had gone silent. Which told me one thing. She didn't know what I was going to do next, and that scared her. Good. I didn't reach out. I didn't poke the bear. I just waited. Because I knew that silence was never her natural state. Karen was all about control. Narrative control, emotional control, image control. Silence meant her grip was slipping. It didn't take long. The following Friday I got a call from my dad. Laurel, he said, sounding more exhausted than usual, are you free to come by this weekend? I think we need to talk. The 3 of us. I already knew what that meant. Karen was trying to regain the narrative. Of course, I said. Sunday work for you? He hesitated. Sunday's perfect. I hung up and stared out the window for a long time, watching a thunderstorm roll over the hills. My fingers itched to text someone, to vent, to prepare. But I didn't. Because this was mine. And I was ready. That weekend I dressed carefully. Nothing too sharp, nothing too dramatic, just calm, soft, neutral tones. I brought nothing with me except my phone and a slim manila folder with one printed photo inside. That was all I needed. When I arrived, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Karen met me at the door with a strained smile, wearing her version of low-key sincerity. A beige knit cardigan, natural makeup, no jewelry. She even smelled different, like she'd swapped her usual citrus perfume for something warmer and motherly. Thanks for coming, she said. Of course, I replied, stepping inside. It's good to be here. The living room looked exactly the same except one thing. The Mustang print was gone. So was the frame. Interesting. My dad was already seated on the couch, arms resting on his knees. He looked older. Not physically, just worn. As if something inside him had shifted slightly out of alignment. Laurel, he said softly. We wanted to clear the air. I nodded. Let's. Karen sat beside him, crossing one leg over the other like she was settling in for a panel discussion. I think there's been a lot of miscommunication, she began. Some hurt feelings, some misunderstandings. I agree, I said. But I want to be clear about one thing. This isn't about feelings. It's about facts. Karen tensed. I reached into the folder and pulled out a single photograph, the one from Cades Cove. Me and my dad in front of the mountains, laughing, cheeks flushed from wind and sun. The one I'd tucked into the notebook Karen intercepted. I handed it to him. I sent you this. Along with a gift. It was signed. It had a letter. Karen signed for it. And then she told you it never arrived. My dad looked at the photo for a long time. His fingers traced the edge of the paper like it was fragile. Karen spoke quickly. I never said it didn't arrive. I said I didn't know what it was. It had no label. It did, I said. And I have proof. Her mouth snapped shut. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't even need to stand. I simply took out my phone, opened the folder marked Truth, for Dad only, and slid it across the coffee table toward him. There's a lot in here, I said. Delivery records. Screenshots. A recording of our last conversation. I didn't want to believe you were being manipulated. But I also couldn't keep pretending I wasn't being erased. Karen's face flushed a deep red. This is outrageous, she said sharply, her composure starting to crack. You're spying, you're twisting everything, you're making me into. I'm not making you into anything, I said quietly. You did that all on your own. My dad raised a hand. Karen. His voice was low. Even. She turned to him, eyes wide. I need to listen to this, he said. She opened her mouth, then stopped. Because for the first time, maybe ever, she realized he wasn't playing along. He wasn't smoothing over. He wasn't protecting her anymore. He was listening to me. Really listening. I'll step out, I said, rising. Take your time. But after this, we need to decide what family actually means. And whether it still includes honesty. I walked out of the house without another word. No drama. No parting shots. Just a quiet exit. Because this wasn't the end. It was the turning point. I didn't hear from either of them for 4 days. 4 days of silence. 4 days of watching my phone light up only for work emails and a couple thinking of you, text from my friend Eli. 4 days of wondering what was happening in that house. What was being said? What was being denied? What was finally being admitted? And then on Thursday night I got the call. My dad. He didn't start with hello. She told me everything, he said. His voice was flat. Not angry. Not surprised. Just tired. She admitted to deleting your messages. To intercepting your mail. To reading your texts and choosing which ones I should see. She said she did it to simplify things. To protect me from drama. He paused. Since when is my daughter drama? I didn't answer. I knew the question wasn't really for me. She said she was scared I'd drift away from her if I stayed too close to you. That she felt overshadowed. I exhaled long and slow. And what did you say? He didn't respond right away. Then, I told her that any woman who feels threatened by a man loving his child isn't protecting him, she's isolating him. I felt tears prick at the back of my eyes. I hadn't cried during any of it, not once. But hearing that in his voice was the first time it felt like something had broken through. I'm so sorry, Laurel, he said. I didn't want to see it. And I should have. I wasn't looking for an apology, I said, voice barely above a whisper. I just wanted you to see me. I do, he said. I do now. We sat in silence on the line for a long time after that. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't tense. It was just quiet. Honest. The kind of silence that doesn't feel like avoidance. It feels like truth. Eventually I asked, so, what now? He sighed. She's gone to stay with her sister for a while. We need space. I need space. And you? I'm going to therapy. I already scheduled something for next week. And I'd like to come visit you. Not to talk about this. Just to see you. Spend time. My throat tightened. I'd like that. That night I sat on my porch with a cup of mint tea, wrapped in a blanket, watching the wind move through the trees. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel like I was holding my breath. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even vindicated. I just felt still. Peaceful. I'd spent so long trying to be heard that I forgot what it felt like to be simply seen. The next morning I got an email from my dad. A subject line with just one word. Kate's. Attached was a scanned copy of a photo. One I hadn't seen in years. It was from that same trip. Only this time it wasn't the one I'd framed. It was me, half asleep in the passenger seat of the car, my dad's hand on the wheel, the Smoky Mountains in the background. He captioned it. My favorite view. Always was. And just like that I knew we'd be okay. Not perfect. Not untouched. But okay. A month later my dad and I sat on the porch of my little house in Asheville, passing a mason jar of sweet tea back and forth like we used to when I was a kid. He was different. Not entirely, he still wore the same flannel shirts, still talked too long about lawn care and car detailing, but something in his face had softened. Or maybe sharpened. It was hard to tell. Maybe both. He looked more awake. Karen hadn't come back. She'd sent a few texts, long emotional ones. Apologies wrapped in self-pity. Half admissions dressed as insight. But nothing that took responsibility, not really. And he'd stopped answering. She wasn't evil, he told me once. But she was scared of being irrelevant. And she made that my problem. And yours. That felt true. And also not my burden to carry anymore. For the first time in years we'd started building new habits. Simple things. Sunday calls, midweek check-ins, shared playlists. He came to my house for dinner once a week, and we'd sit in my backyard under the hanging lights I'd strung up last summer but hadn't turned on until now. He brought photos sometimes. From the attic. From old boxes. Things Karen had packed away without asking. We'd sort them together. Some were water-damaged, faded. Others still vibrant. We laughed over some. Cried over one or two. Mostly we just remembered. I didn't know you were hurting, he said one night, flipping through a photo album. I was so busy trying to make everything feel normal again that I didn't see what was missing. You weren't the only one, I said. Because I'd spent years shrinking, smoothing, accommodating, believing that being low maintenance made me lovable. That if I asked for nothing I couldn't be disappointed. But silence doesn't protect you. It just erases you quietly. I wasn't quiet anymore. And I wasn't erased. In June I got an offer from a documentary production studio in Atlanta. They loved my editing work and wanted me to pitch a series on family estrangement and reconciliation. They said the tone of my work felt lived in, like a bruise that's almost healed. I accepted. Not just the job but the compliment. The wound. The healing. All of it. The night before I moved my dad helped me pack up my books. He pulled one off the shelf and flipped it open. Inside the front cover was a small sticker, the kind that said "From the Library of." He read it aloud. Laurel Kingsley. Then he looked at me. "You know," he said, "if anyone ever tried to erase you again, they'd have to burn every library." I smiled. Let them try. Because I wasn't invisible anymore. Not to my dad. Not to the world. And most importantly, not to myself.